I'm Malcolm Underhill, a solicitor at IBB Solicitors. I specialise in acting for survivors of child sexual abuse, and with me today is Keeley Taverner, psychotherapist from Key for Change. Keeley, dealing with a number of child abuse survivors of varying ages, you know, I sort of sense from them, because they disclose at different times, that they use different techniques to kind of blot out what happened to them in childhood. And I'm interested to hear from your experience of what people say to you, what devices people use to just, in a sense, to keep it within themselves so they don't have to confront it, either by talking to others or just even within themselves.
I think what's really interesting in terms of blotting out is often, people often don't come to therapy for that in the first instance. It's often, I find, it might be something like anxiety or depression, something more milder. And it's actually as we begin to delve that we can, I think the relationship, the rapport has to be there. And once we get beyond some of the ways that they've coped, so sometimes that might be by sometimes being a perfectionist. Yeah. Sometimes that can be about being extremely busy. Sometimes that can be about self-harm practices that are incredibly embedded. And so I might get curious about, well, why is it that you self-sabotage? You know, so when we begin to look at that, it's a suspicion sometimes that I have, and then you'll begin to unpick and undiscover. So, for example, I think traditionally alcohol and drugs are things that we're used to, but it's not necessarily as simple as the kind of headline self-sabotage tactics. And if I think about drugs and alcohol as forms of addiction, to my mind, they are tools to help manage difficult emotional hurts. Difficult emotional hurts. So once you get beyond that, you're often left with the rawness of what they've experienced. And
so when you're seeking to support them and they're coming to you and you know, I mean, they've been blocking it out, and that's, as you say, the classic is kind of drugs or alcohol. I mean, that, you know, you've got to address that first, surely, before you can begin to get down to those deeper issues that have caused so much distress and hurt over maybe 10, 30, 40 years or even longer.
I think for me as a psychotherapist, it's very delicate. So often, sometimes people don't want to talk about that. They want to look at everything else before we get to the nub of the issue. So remember, if they've been in denial or they've buried a very difficult, heinous experience, then that if they've denied it to themselves, they don't necessarily want to bring that up per se. But sometimes I'll get a hunch like things won't make sense to me. And because trust has been sabotaged at some particular point in their life by someone who was given a place of trust, I know that that is then manifesting itself in our relationship together. So they have to trust me to go somewhere that they may have not been in a long time. And so that's when we get beyond the we get to the nub of the issue. And so ways of coping are often what I become acutely aware of is an inherent sense of worthlessness, a real lack of self-regard and self-harm in ways that leave me baffled and also the client baffled. And that is then when we get really into delicately unpacking the experiences that have, often the sexual traumas that have happened to them, which have had an impact on their relationships. Sometimes I might have clients who are particularly promiscuous or who aren't able to have relationships with men that are able, or women, that are healthy and wholesome.
I mean, it's an incredibly complicated issue, and really, you know, and it's only spending time with someone like you that really the individual can begin to sort of work their way from, you know, a position of darkness to a much happier future. But for the moment, Keeley, thank you for coming in today.